Hey everyone, this is Barack Lesnar of Barack Lesnar Hoops, and I wanted to cover this 12-team draft that I did. I drafted from 11th, and this is an actual draft. As you can see, everyone is here, and these are people that all create, or most of them create, fantasy basketball content. I'm going to try to put links to their content in my description because I would like to see this community grow. And I also wanted to challenge myself against other fantasy basketball content creators. And so far, I think I've put together a really strong team that you, my fellow loyal followers of Barack Lesnar Hoops, would be proud of. Because you know what? I represent you, this strategy, fantasy basketball. So we have to do well against other fantasy basketball content creators. So let's look at my team. Oh, and before we get too far, smash that like button for me and subscribe if you haven't yet. This draft was from the 11th pick, and I think I put together a really strong team. I started with Paul George, like I told you guys in my sleepers videos, and then I went with Anthony Davis, and I built a really strong team. I will tune in a little closer to the end of the draft so we can go into more detail as to why I drafted the way that I did. So far, this has me ranked as the third best team. We will see. All right, so with my last pick, I would love to pick up Gary Trent Jr. I went very point guard and big heavy with this build and was picking my forwards towards the end of the draft. I did end up managing to grab Scotty Barnes pretty late. I thought that was a very nice pickup late. And like I said, I think I put together an incredibly strong team. Not the typical team that I put together, but I think drafting from 11th, you have to be a little more creative to make sure you put together a strong team. And I think I did that. All right, so if I manage to land him at 155, I really like the idea of grabbing Otto Porter Jr. I already have too many big men, so Thaddeus Young wouldn't make too much sense for me. Gary Trent Jr. also hits a ton of threes, is going to hit more threes than Otto Porter Jr. I just think Otto Porter Jr. is more well-balanced a contributor. Nicholas Claxton would be a nice, if I needed a fifth big, but I do not right now. If I had the IR space, TJ Warren would make sense as a stash right now, but I already have to deal with Zion Williamson, so I'd rather not. Terrence Mann, another decent pickup really late that has the possibility of getting minutes, and he actually fits really nicely with my build. So I think I might go with Terrence Mann to round out this draft. I need another small forward, and with my very last pick at 155, I think he has the opportunity to outproduce most of these other guys I'm going to grab. So there's like Justin Holiday, but I really think the opportunity Terrence Mann has ahead of him. And he did great in the playoffs when Kawhi went down. I just can't help but think he's going to go into the season with a lot of confidence, a lot of minutes, and really produce. John Wall, probably not worth the headache. Thomas Bryant, probably not worth the headache. So right now I'm looking at Gary Trent Jr. or I'm looking at Terrence Mann, and I'm probably leaning towards Gary Trent Jr. Though the thing is, Gary Trent Jr. hurts my field goal percentage, and that's actually something I'm trying to improve versus Terrence Mann, where he'll still get me some threes, he'll still get me some defensive stats, but the field goal percentage works a little better with what I'm doing, and the free throw percentage doesn't really matter with this build because free throw percentage is not really an area I'm very strong in. I'm not the worst in it, but field goal percentage is more my expertise. 3-pointers made. Definitely want to give that a bit of a boost just to be closer to the top. Overall, though, very satisfied with this team. And let's see who I'll have available. Otto Porter Jr., like I said, is another option that we have available. Either way, it looks like I'm going to have a shot at a decent player. So Gary Trent will not be who I pick up, but Otto Porter Jr., very good chance he's available with my last pick. So it slipped my mind, but I only have 2 shooting guards at this point in the draft, which is not something I had really accounted for. So how do I make up for that? All right, we'll see. All right, so with my last pick, I ended up going with Kevin Werder. I was looking at Otto Porter Jr. I was looking at Terrence Mann. But what ended up happening is I realized I only had 2 shooting guard eligible players because I picked up a couple of point guards that did not have shooting guard eligibility, and I did not notice until late in the draft. So my final team is Drew Holiday, D'Angelo Russell, Mike Conley, Paul George, Anthony Davis, Christian Wood, PJ Washington, Alperen Sengun, Zion Williamson, Harrison Barnes, Lauri Markkanen, Scotty Barnes, Kevin Werder. And this is ranking me so high despite it having kind of lowly projections for these rookies and young players. And I expect those young players to outproduce where I drafted them. So let's see what Giancarlo had. Giancarlo is a diamond tier player, definitely somebody I will be taking seriously, and he has a lot of players that I tell you guys to draft. I can see why he has a very strong team. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Bradley Beal, Gordon Hayward, Tobias Harris, Joel Embiid, Pascal Siakam, Jared Allen, Chris Boucher, Keldon Johnson, Karis LeVert, Dennis Schrader, Eric Bledsoe, Josh Hart. Don't love the final picks as much. I think there's a lot of boom or bust potential with some of those final picks, but at the end of the day, that's what you have to do with those final picks. Fantasy bench warmers, shout out to them. James Harden, Lonzo Ball, Chris Paul, Bogdan Bogdanovic, Miles Bridges, Patrick Williams, DeAndre Ayton, Jonas Valanciunas. Really like that combination there. Daniel Gafford, Jordan Poole, Joe Harris, somebody I was looking at, Desmond Bane, Jay Sean Tate. Pretty decent pick there. And then fantasy bench warmers, that's who we just discussed. And in second came MC, Kyle Lowry, Mikal Bridges, Jalen Green, RJ Barrett, John Collins, Rashawn Holmes, Karl Anthony Towns, Nikola Vucevic. Another combination I'm a big fan of. Jordan Clarkson, Tim Hardaway Jr., Malik Beasley, Matisse Thybulle, Gary Trent Jr. Gary Trent Jr., a player I had my eyes on at the very end of the draft, but he was sniped. Still though, either way, let's see if him and I faced off. I'm losing 3-pointers for sure, but I have him in points, I have him in rebounds, I have him in assists, I have him in steals, I have him in blocks, and I would probably lose turnovers. So despite being ranked higher than me, it looks like I'd be competitive against a lot of these guys. So he was the only one with more threes than me. So as far as points, yeah, so it looks like I'd be pretty competitive in this league. Definitely El Fast Break del NBA Fantasy. I believe he does Spanish content, so shout out to him. Yo hablo español, y si usted juega fantasy basketball y habla español, pues bienvenidos a mi canal y ve el canal de El Fast Break del NBA Fantasy, porque aparentemente él sabe lo que está haciendo. That means follow El Fast Break del NBA Fantasy if you speak Spanish and you like fantasy basketball, because apparently he knows what he's doing. Let's look at a few more teams. John Benedict's team: Trae Young, DeJounte Murray, John Morant, Andrew Wiggins, Robert Covington, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Rudy Gobert, Andre Drummond, Bojan Bogdanovic, Ivica Zubac, Seth Curry, Luguentz Dort, Ricky Rubio. Not really a fan of that team. Very mismatched pieces. I don't think that team will do well, but we will see. It's a long season. A lot of things still that need to pan out. But all right, guys, it was very fun doing this draft, and I will cover Poppy Roy's team because I believe he does fantasy basketball content for my Filipino people. So let's look at the team he put together. Steph Curry, Fred VanVleet, LeBron James, Sadiq Bey, Kristaps Porzingis, Al Horford, Yusuf Nurkic, Wendell Carter Jr., Derek White, big fan of that pick, Terry Rozier, Marcus Smart. Those were all point guards I was looking at. Jaden McDaniels and had I picked him, I probably wouldn't have ended up as short on shooting guards as I ended up being. So yeah, I ended up missing that probably because I grabbed too many big men. Either way, I think this team is going to be just fine. I might have to trade and try to hope maybe somebody like Mike Conley gets shooting guard eligibility, which probably won't happen. But I like what Papa Roy did. He loaded up on really good point guards: Stephen Curry, Fred VanVleet, Derek White, Terry Rozier, Marcus Smart. That's a really good rotation. So I guess the way I would have to beat his team, it's just a blitz attack, because I just have a really strong big man rotation, especially once I get Zion Williamson back. Gonna throw him in the IR real quick. Overall, really love this team. Anthony Davis, Christian Wood, that is a deadly two-headed monster right there. You add Sengun to the mix, you add Williamson to the mix. Lauri Markkanen has some upside. Scotty Barnes has some upside. Drew Holiday, great pick up there. D'Angelo Russell, we'll see. I'm not the biggest D'Angelo Russell fan, but we have seen him be a decent fantasy player in the past, and if he remains healthy, he could possibly help your team. So yeah, thank you so much for watching. I hope this was educational. I hope you learned something. Let me see if I can show you the results that are up the draft board so that you can see where everyone was picked. Yep, so Paul George was my first round pick, Anthony Davis my second round pick, etc., etc. I was able to grab Zion Williamson in the 5th round. D'Angelo Russell was my 6th round pick. Went with PJ Washington in the 7th. Mike Conley in the 8th. Alperen Sengun, had to grab him in the 9th because he was not going to make it beyond that. Then Harrison Barnes, because I noticed I was short on small forwards. I have a lot of power forwards, so at some point I might trade one of these power forwards for a shooting guard eligible player. Paul George used to have shooting guard eligibility. He no longer does. Maybe he does get it with Kawhi Leonard injured. Who knows? Kevin Huerter does have that shooting guard eligibility. Scotty Barnes, really like his upside. So overall, very happy with the team that I put together. And I would love to know your thoughts. Leave a comment and let me know if you think this is a team that would be competitive. It was a deep draft. Fantasy basketball content creators, let me know if you feel that my team holds its own. And again, I drafted from 11th out of 12th. Very much looking forward to your thoughts and your comments. All right, smash that like button for me. Again, subscribe to Barack Lesnar Hoops. Until next time, season starts on Tuesday. I have some more videos coming out for you soon. Thank you again. Take care.